Welcome to Lean Into Excellence, a Workstream Consulting podcast. I'm Liz Crescenti.
And I'm Marco Bonilla.
And we will be your hosts as we embark on our continuous improvement journey. Welcome back to another episode of Lean Into Excellence. I'm Liz Crescenti.
And I'm Marco Bonilla.
And today's episode is extra special. It's our 10th episode, so we are so grateful and thankful we've made it this far. So thanks for all our listeners. And we also have Lucy O'Keefe joining us. She is the CEO and founder of Dart Frog Consulting. And we are going to jump into Agile and its role in continuous improvement. So very excited about that.
Lucy, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so to give people a little bit of background, Lucy and I have known each other 3 decades, just to round down a little bit. So 3 decades. And I had the pleasure not too long ago, about 18 months ago, to sit in and get certified by her in Agile as an Agile Scrum Master. So Lucy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this world, right? Because obviously how we start isn't how we end, right?
Yep.
To our experience, so.
Yeah, exactly. So, funny story. I went to college and I wanted to be behind the scenes. So just me and the computer, to be honest, because I was very shy. I didn't want to have to talk to people. So got my bachelor's, in systems analysis, my master's in management information systems, started as a software developer. And I was really happy not having to deal with people. And that was back in 94. So I'm aging myself a little bit here. But then back in 2012, I was a business systems analyst at a company in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I went to a conference for business analysts and project managers. And I went into this talk and this woman was talking about Scrum. And I sat there and I was just thinking about, how different Scrum was from Waterfall, what I was used to doing, in IT. That's what we did. And I was doing that for almost 2 decades at that time. And how much better it would be if we adopted Scrum and Agile ways of working. And I got back to my company and I said, we must try this. So I started just borrowing some practices from Scrum and adopting those in the waterfall projects that we were working on. And the company saw the benefits of it. We started, just doing Scrum within our teams. And that really brought me out of my shell, to be honest with you. So, anyone that knew me when I was in my early 20s knows, that I would not be the type of person that would be here talking to you in a podcast, that would be speaking in conferences, that would be training people, because that's not just who I was. And Scrum completely changed my life. Because I am just so passionate about it and what it can do for teams and organizations. And, through, working in a team as a developer first, and then as a Scrum Master, it just really helped me see how important it is for people to work in an agile way of working, if you will, where we are focused on continuous improvement, where we are, continuously replanning to make sure that we're delighting the customer, right? It's not about what it is that we're doing, for ourselves within the organization. And, I ended up getting some certifications, the CSM Certified Scrum Master, which is the one that I certified you on, and then a second certification, which was the Product Owner. And I just loved how my instructor was doing the class. And it turned out that she has been my mentor for 7 years now. Her name is Anu Smalley, which you've met as well, Marco, in that class. And I just wanted to do that. Like, I just love the way that she was able to influence people and help people reach their goals through Scrum and through Agile. And that's what I decided that I wanted to do. And here I am today, right? I'm a certified Scrum trainer. I'm a certified team coach with Scrum Alliance. And I just love helping people, see what Scrum and Agile can do for them, not just at work. I mean, of course, at work, because that's the majority of what people learn Scrum for, but even in their own lives. And I use, Agile concepts in my own life as well, to manage things that I need to do for myself. So that's how I got here, I guess.
Lucy, let me ask you a couple of questions because you triggered some thoughts. So
Yep.
you went to a conference, you heard about Agile, and obviously it's usually on the surface, right? It's usually not a deep dive like what you did, right? What about Scrum or Agile hooked you on that the first time you heard about it?
For me, it was common sense. Having worked in waterfall for so many years and seeing the struggle, right? And the fact that, I had worked in many, many projects, none of them were ever delivered on time, on budget, or on scope, right? Because it's just not a great way to do software. And everything I saw about the continuous improvement and feedback loops and doing it a little bit at a time, starting with what you know, right? And getting feedback and not worrying about scope creep, right? Because we want to make sure that we're delighting the customer. It just made sense to me that was the best way to do software, and not just software, right? You can use Scrum for many, many things,
Right.
but just the common sense of it all is what just that light bulb just went off in my head when I heard that, and I loved developing and coding and all of that, but it was just a much better way of collaborating with other people to make sure that we're delivering the right thing.
And Lucy, with that said, you talked about taking some of the techniques and bringing it to the workplace, right? So you came from a conference, you brought it to the workplace. Culturally, was it a challenge? Because sometimes we try to introduce continuous improvement on different levels,
Mhm.
whether
People don't
executive
like
level.
change. We say
Yeah,
it all the time. It's
Yep. Oh
uncomfortable.
no.
it's
Yep.
uncomfortable, right? But
Yeah.
obviously,
Sure.
for the most part, for the good, we have good intentions. How
Yeah.
was it for you that first time you said, I just came from a conference, I learned all these potential applicable techniques to our world.
Yeah.
How were you able to get people on your side? And were you fighting it the whole way,
Yeah.
or
Any roadblocks or hesitation?
Yeah. So the thing is, just like any habit, right? If you want to start a new habit, you're not going to start 20 at the same time. So the key thing for me was I wasn't calling it Agile. I wasn't calling it Scrum. I was just, trying to say, I learned these things. Can we try a few things? So the first thing we did is we got the BRDs, the business requirements document that we had. And I was like, okay, can we translate these into user stories? Right. So we did that. Great. Then we were working on this a little more. And I was like, can we meet every Monday? And developers, can you tell us which one of these you want to work on this week? And they would. And then a week later, I was like, can we start meeting every day just for 15 minutes, just to make sure that everybody knows what's going on? And we started doing that. And then it was, the last thing was, can we meet every Friday and just review what you guys coded during the week? And see, if we have any defects, if there's anything that needs to change. And everybody was fine with that because once again, I wasn't trying to completely change the way that we were working. I was just introducing little by little new habits, right? And at the end of that, I think, and for some reason, this is the number that keeps, that stays in my head is we had 13 defects at the end of the project. If you've worked in software at all, 13 defects is amazing
Yeah.
at the end of
it's it's
any
nothing.
project,
It's a
A home
right?
squeeze.
run.
It's nothing,
Yeah.
right? But why was that? It's because we were meeting every week to see what was being delivered, right? Because we were able to get that feedback. It wasn't from stakeholders at that time, right? But from the rest of the project team, and then everyone saw the benefits, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't me coming in saying we must do Scrum, we must work in an agile way, please learn Scrum. Like it wasn't that, right? Because I hadn't really learned Scrum, but it's like,
Mhm.
oh, I know that there are these practices, right? And these events, and we used to call them ceremonies back then. That we do. I was like, how can I incorporate that into a waterfall world?
Mhm.
Right, in a way that's going to help us improve a little bit, the way that we are doing our things. So
Yep.
that's how that happened.
That's fantastic because so many people, learn something new and they just want to run with it. And you just kind of slowly eased everyone into it. And it's almost like they were doing it before they realized they were doing it. And I think
Right.
that's just a really smart way of just kind of approaching any type of, new behavior. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't done is define what agile is, right?
I was just going to say
Yeah,
that
to give our audience at least a
because people are going to be
fundamental.
like, what are you guys talking about?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
start from the
just
beginning. Let's
right,
take it on back.
right. So, Lucy, in a small paragraph, what is agile, and why do you see the benefit? Right, what is it that it does for you? Oh, for a company, I should say.
Sure. So funny you're asking that question because just last week, one of the signatories of what we call the Agile Manifesto or the Manifesto for Agile Software Development posted something on LinkedIn because somebody asked him what Agile is, and what he said is Agile is early delivery of business value with reduced bureaucracy.
Wow.
and
Okay.
and and I don't think I can come up with a better definition of what agile is than that. But I mean, of course, if you go and read the Agile Manifesto, you're going to see the Agile is a set of 4 values and 12 principles. It is a mindset, and it's really focused on delighting the customer, on empowering teams, right? On self management, better ways of working, right? The commonsensical stuff that I talked about earlier, right? So that's what Agile is. It's not a methodology. A lot of people think, oh, it's an Agile methodology. No, you can't do Agile, right? Agile is something that you are. It's something that you become because you are demonstrating those values and those principles that I talked about. And of course, you have all these other practices that come under the Agile umbrella. But Agile is just these 4 values, these 12 principles, and it's all about delivering high quality products as fast as possible so we can get feedback and improve on whatever it is that we did before.
Yeah, and exceeding expectations, right, is what you're doing. I mean, you're not
Yes.
just delighting, you're really exceeding, right?
Yeah, I mean that, and that's key, right?
Right, and it's and if I may, right, and it's usually in
Yep.
the form of on time delivery, right,
Mm-hmm.
quality,
Yep.
and really the two big
Yes.
things, and safety is the third. Hopefully, I don't know in a software world, but safety is something we're always thinking about in a product development world, right? But
Right.
on time
Right.
delivery and quality, right, least amount of
Yeah.
waste to get the biggest bang for your
Make
buck,
it
right?
right. Yeah, exactly. So it builds on, lean thinking as well, right? So the removal of waste is huge
Right.
when we're talking about agile, right? Focus on, the most important things. There's actually a principle in agile that it's called, it says simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. When I first heard that over 12 years ago, I was like, what the heck does that mean, right? I get the simplicity is essential, but maximizing the amount of work not done. A lot of people don't think about that, about how much we gold plate, right? How much we do things that we shouldn't be doing. And that's why a lot of projects just last so long because we are working on low priority items that aren't bringing a lot of value. So when we're talking about agile, it's all about bringing value, right? So I've worked in agile products where we didn't deliver even half of the requirements, if you will, because they weren't that valuable. And we got to a point that because we did deliver the highest priority items first, the product owner or the users, customers, stakeholders are all like, we don't need anything else. You've delivered everything. We can do our job now. We can use this software that you've created to do what we need to do what we need to do with it. Why continue to spend money and spend time? So and that product specifically, we finished months in advance, which is something you don't see in the traditional world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in my world, we talk about analysis paralysis, where they want the
Mm-hmm.
perfect product out the very first
Yep.
time, and we know you're never going to finish a development cycle if that's the case, right? So
Right.
we'll get on the next iteration, which is perfect if you hit all the major um, points, right? All the high
Mm-hmm.
quality, high value target.
Right.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. But you mentioned the customer a lot, and we'll go. I'm going to loop back around to the design side in a second. But how
Yep.
important have you seen, especially taking the tactic of implementing the stakeholder into the process? So I'll give you an example. So I teach design thinking at the
Mm-hmm.
universities, right? And that's really you got to involve the stakeholder from day one, right? In the product development world I came from, of course, started years ago. We weren't so I shouldn't say interested, but once they gave us specs, right? We call them specifications.
Yep.
They left us alone for months, which
Yep.
is very dangerous, right? No updates, no. Here's our result of what you gave us 6 months later, and they're like, well, yeah, you met
Not what I
some,
wanted.
yeah, you exactly, you met some of the technical needs, right? But because there wasn't that interaction with the stakeholders, we didn't really get down to the fundamentals, what they really needed, right? Versus wanted,
Yep.
right? You know how the language goes.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so
Yep.
tell us in your world, since you switched to this new concept of introducing a better flow and incorporating stakeholders, how's that worked out for you? And why is it so beneficial to bring them in sooner than later?
Because we want to make sure that we give them what they need, right? So this, I know this. When we're working a traditional way, as you said, we talk to the stakeholders in the beginning, we gather the requirements from them, and we don't meet again until it's over, right?
Oh, you
And I
think
say
it's
this in all
over?
my
Or you think it's over?
oh yeah, exactly, exactly. So I say this in all my class because I do a comparison between traditional or waterfall and agile. If people knew exactly what they wanted, right? If we were that clairvoyant that we can tell what we need 18 months from now, we'd all be millionaires, right? And we wouldn't need to be doing what we're doing. But we're not. Humans don't know what they want until they're able to see it.
Exactly.
Right. So
Absolutely.
I'm sure you've seen it as well, where, we have a project that goes for 18 months. We deliver the project. They're not delighted, right? Because it's not necessarily what they wanted. It's what they thought they wanted. But when they start using it, it's not really what they wanted. It's not meeting their needs. And, we've done studies and checked how it was being used. Maybe 50% of the features are being used, right? Because we didn't have that conversation. In Agile, it's completely different. So actually, one of the principles in the Agile Manifesto is that business people and developers must work together daily, right, throughout the project. Why do we do that? Because the product is for the customer, it's for the stakeholder, it's not for us,
Right, right.
right?
Mhm.
We're not the end
So
game, right?
unless exactly, so unless we understand and get the feedback from them as often as possible, we're not going to be delivering what's truly needed. So there's various ways that we do that in Agile, right, and more specifically in Scrum. And I'm just talking more about Scrum because that's what I do most of the time. We have what we call sprint reviews, right? So at the end of every sprint or iteration, we get together. The stakeholders are there. We do a demo of a usable product, right, that we created, or a usable piece of that
Right.
product, which we call an increment. Then they can see it in action, if you will, right?
Right.
And they'll tell you, oh, that's great, or can we tweak this a little bit? Can we change this? Can we do that? Right. And then we go back to the drawing board. We iterate on that.
Right.
Right. And then, and then we review it again next time and next time. And, and by the time that we finish this whole product, there's very little that they don't like because they've been a part of the process.
So, Lucy, one of the things I try to iterate with the classes we teach in Lean Six Sigma is that, if there's a defect in the process, we don't want to keep it going, right? Because the longer it flows in the process, more time is wasted, more resources are wasted, and eventually you just got to bring it back, right? So the concept of failing fast, right, that came out of the software world. You want to know if something's defective, stop right now, right? So how does that work in the agile flow?
Yep. Yeah. So funny thing about that, I just want to bring this up as well. So if you're familiar with the Toyota production system, right, that is something that
Yeah,
they did there as well, right, where they finally said, we want to stop the process as soon as we know that there's something wrong, right? So they gave everyone the ability to hit this button that would stop the production of the car so they could fix the problem. So that's part of lean, of course.
yeah, not
Uh,
passing the buck, right? Not throwing it
yeah,
over the
yeah,
fence,
exactly. Let's
right?
not
Right.
wait until the whole car is done for us to take it apart and
Yeah.
fix an issue, right? So we do the same thing here, and that's why we work in iterations, and iterations are just short, spurts of time, if you will, that you decide how long a team want to go to create a part of this product, right? So if we work in short iterations, we are going to learn very quickly whether we did something bad or something wrong, or that we're failing, right? The longer your iterations are, the longer it's going to take you to figure out that there's something wrong. And going back to what you said, the more costly it's going to be to go back and fix the issues, right? So we do, advise people to, have shorter sprints or shorter iterations, if you will. In Scrum, you're able to have up to 1 month iterations. I think that that's way too long, right? If you're
Mhm.
waiting 4 weeks to 1 month to get feedback on something you did on week one, then it's going to be the same issue, right? We've already forgotten what it is that we did, so it's going to take us longer to fix the issue, and then we're not going to get feedback again in another 4 weeks. So those feedback loops that we get are going to help us with that failing fast idea, right? That you were talking about, where let's find out as soon as possible. But not just that, not just the feedback from the stakeholders, but on a daily basis, the team itself, right, should be having those conversations and figuring out what's working and what's not working, right? And that's why we meet daily, for 15 minutes or less to inspect where we are and make sure that we are progressing in the right direction.
Yeah, and like you said, 15 minutes or less. So it's not like someone has to think, oh, I got to meet with them. It's just another meeting every, an hour a day. It doesn't have to be. It can be, like you said, 15 minutes or less, but you're on the same page and it's going to avoid, the disturbance later on. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
and being transparent, right? Transparent about what's going on.
Yeah.
That way we do find out as soon as possible whether there is something, headed in the wrong direction, so we can pivot at that time and and fix that and adapt our processes accordingly.
yeah, we say in class a lot of times, speed without quality is just making more stuff more without saying the word.
Yep.
No, just faster,
Technical
right?
debt.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I don't know where I got this a long time ago. The four pillars that I always teach in classes: safety first, right? Safety, quality, speed, right? Without affecting the previous two,
Mhm.
then cost last, right?
Mhm.
If you get the safety, quality, and speed in those orders, the cost will work itself out, right?
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
take care of
So
itself.
exactly.
but
Exactly.
you don't want to put speed before cost because again, you're just producing more stuff
Mhm.
that you can't sell, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in either you have to scrap it. In our world, we call it scrapping, right? We have to literally physically take out and throw it out the window, right?
Yeah.
It's just not beneficial. So, I mean, the concept you talk about is fantastic, right? These stand up meetings, we call them stand up meetings because literally we don't want anybody sitting down and getting comfortable, right?
Right. Yep.
We want to talk about what we need to attack today or correct, right? So these short
Right.
sprints.
Yep.
So you mentioned sprints before, but we haven't defined what a sprint is. So can you
Right.
kind of cover that, Lucy?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, it's 1 to 4 weeks. The team should be able to decide. Sometimes organizations do dictate what that is, but the team should be able to decide how long those iterations are, that time frame is, enough time for them to get the work done. But at the same time, shorten those feedback loops that we're talking about. So a sprint is where, a team gets together, and this is in Scrum, of course, where a team gets together to turn ideas that exist in what we call the backlog, right? That's where we hold all the requirements, if you will, into value, right? So this is where we're actually creating those increments of the product that are valuable to our clients. Right. So within that sprint, there's various things that we do, but the majority of the time is really working towards creating that increment that's going to create value for the customer. And as I said before, the shorter it is, the shorter your feedback loops are as well, right? So if you have to fail fast, you want those shorter sprints, right? If it's something that it's okay to go a little longer, you can go a little longer, right? And the most popular sprint length is 2 weeks, which I think is pretty perfect, to be honest, because I think it's just the right balance of having good amount of time to do the work, but then having those short feedback loops as well. But yeah, so the sprint is just that amount of time that a team decides that they're going to focus on a single objective and then deliver that value at the end of that iteration or that time frame.
Yeah, Lucy, I want to ask you, the reason you and I exist is because a lot of companies still haven't adopted im- continuous improvement techniques, let's call it, right? Whatever that may
Yep.
be.
Yep.
So when companies work with you, do they appreciate or they kind of get giddy because they know that using a Scrum policy or an environment to get their products out the door, and do they get excited to work with you because they know you're going to get them involved every few weeks?
Yes and no. So I have to say that there is a lot of resistance to change, like we talked about earlier. And a lot of times they just don't understand why it's important for them to be a part of the process.
Interesting.
So if they are not educated, for them, it is an annoyance. To be honest, I've seen that in organizations where they're like, I don't want to go to a meeting every 2 weeks. Why do you need me to be there? I told you what it is that I want. Just deliver it, right? Because they're used to that old way
Throwing it over the
of,
wall.
of
Yeah,
thinking.
Yep.
yeah,
Right.
I
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Right. But I think what has happened in a lot of organizations is because I like to do some training with stakeholders and leaders so they understand what's in it for them, right?
Yeah.
Majority of the time they don't know what's in it for them, and they're like, this is just a team thing. Once they do understand that, once they do understand the agile mindset, if you will, and they see how beneficial that can be, right? I think that they're then more willing to come into those review meetings, if you will, right? And have those conversations and give their feedback because they know that based on their feedback, we're going to be able to deliver better products.
Right.
There is a learning curve, if you will,
Yeah.
right? Once we go into organizations, because they're so used to that old way of doing things,
Yep.
that it's easier, right? Let me just tell you everything today, and 18 months from now, just give it to me. I told you what I want, right? They tend to forget that they never get exactly what they need.
Right.
But I've seen that, as they see the value more and more, they're more willing to, to come into those meetings and give the feedback and work more closely with the teams. It's not just the review meetings, right? Sometimes we do want stakeholders to come into some other meetings and help explain the requirements that they wrote, what their requests were. So I've seen a lot of that happen in organizations, but as I said before, it takes a little bit of time. It's not something that they're willing to do from day one.
I can imagine that once they go through it once with you and see the benefit, right? The benefit of what they've gained compared to what they've gotten in the past. Like you said,
Yeah.
throw over the fence, get to the end. They have to accept what they got because either they're not going to spend any more what we call NRE, which is engineering, development, and they just got to get it in the market because they're too late. They're already behind the eight
Right.
ball, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So once they run through this once with you and they say, you know what, we saved, I'm making up a number, a third of the time, a third of the cost, a third of the frustration, they actually got what we wanted, it's worth it on our end to be part
Right.
of your team. Your development team is kind of what they are, right? You pulled them in. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I bet,
I mean, I think, yeah,
yeah, I bet,
they want to see the benefit before they actually,
right.
you know, adopt it,
Yeah.
100%.
But
Yeah.
I'm sure repeat customers, it gets quicker and quicker to bring them in once they've seen the benefits.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of it has to do with the culture of the organization as well.
Again,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm sure that varies everywhere you go. So,
Yes.
Fighting culture is
Definitely.
a huge upstream battle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I tend to say that, teams can do Scrum or whatever other framework they choose until they're blue in the face. But if the culture of the organization doesn't change,
doesn't
you're
adapt to
never
it.
really going to see all the benefit
Right.
that you
Yeah.
can get from working in
Right.
this manner.
So let
Yeah.
me switch gears a little bit, Lucy, right? So we were talking about the client or the customer, right? Because we're here for them, right? We're here to exceed their
Mhm.
expectations. But let's talk about some of the challenges we get from the inside. So I'm going to give you an example, right? In the Lean Six Sigma world,
Okay.
we have development techniques too, right? So most people think of Lean Six Sigma on the operation side. After a product's been developed, how do we minimize process inefficiencies and waste, etc.? But you also have
Mhm.
techniques on the front end. One of the challenges we have with designers, and maybe in your world it's called programmers, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, that they feel that some of these techniques are hindrance to their creativity, right?
Mhm.
Because as you said, right, they want to be left alone. You were that kind of person. I'm a STEM, right? We come out of school and we just want to be put in a lab and just leave us alone. Let us
Yeah.
tinker. But they consider these techniques or these flow mechanisms to be hindrance to their creativity. Like it's going to get in their way.
Yeah.
How have you addressed that?
So like I've never heard the side of, it's stifling my creativity or anything like that, but I have seen where, a lot of them will say that, there's too much overhead. There's too many meetings, right? There's too much this, too much that. I just want to sit and do my job and get that done. I don't want to have to come and talk to the other developers. I don't want to have to come and talk to stakeholders, right? And that's like the hardcore, what we used to call programmer, right?
Right, right.
Back then, they feel like that, and there are some people that you're not going to change their mind. I've come to acknowledge that, because it does get very frustrating if you do try to change everybody's minds. You can't change people unless they want to be changed, right? But a lot of times, again, once they start seeing the benefits of working in a more collaborative way, right? I think that they start, coming to the lighter side of
Yeah.
things.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Once they see it
But
in
but one
action.
thing, yeah, but one thing with Agile, whether you're doing Scrum or Kanban or any other framework, is that it actually allows you to be more creative. It allows you to be more innovative because it is an experiment, right? We are experimenting every single time. And as long as the culture within your organization allows you to fail, right? As long as there's no repercussions if you do fail, I think that teams see that they are able to innovate more and to be more creative because of that experimentation that happens, right? So I don't think that suffers. For me, it's more, they think there's too much overhead. I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to sit and do my work.
Sometimes they're just not customer facing individuals, right?
Right.
They're just not people, right? Which is fine. I mean, it's
Right.
not a judgment on them. That might take some training too. Says, look, you know what?
Hmm.
This isn't going to happen less. It's going to happen more, right?
Right.
So again, as STEMs, we tend to have that individuals from like the Big Bang Theory show. I like to reference, right?
Right.
They
Yep,
just want to
that's
do
true.
what they do, and understandably, right? That's what they were used to, and that's what they expected coming out of college. That's why they went down this path. But you can't ignore the customer, right? Because without a customer, you don't have a
Exactly.
business.
They don't have a job.
Right.
There's no
Yeah.
business, right? And they in tinkering or being part of a what do you call it, like a new concept development with no customer at the other end is not
Right.
realistic. There's very
Yeah.
few of those in the
Yeah.
world.
What's the point?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So we
Exactly.
run a business,
Yeah.
and you know what? The customer has the last say, right? If he's going to pay for what you're doing at the end of the day. Well, at
Yeah.
least the
Hmm.
final. I mean, they're paying along the way, but are they going to take that product and run with it, right, to
Right.
industry? So
Yep.
really interesting. So I guess shifting gears again, let's talk about leadership, right? Adoption, because some of the issues, it's not getting some the people in the trenches, who are going to be using some of these techniques,
Mhm.
is spreading that culture, getting leadership to say, hey, this is the way we want to go. And you need them for long-term commitment, right? Because if you
Exactly.
get
Yep.
those in the trenches like yourself and myself, like we've been there, we adopt some of the techniques and we keep using them, but we don't have the support of the greater picture, right? For long-term
Yep.
generation. How important is the leadership all the way to executives, right? At top of the
Yeah.
food chain.
Yeah. I mean, it's key, right? Like I said before, teams can adopt Scrum or any other framework and do the practice, right? And practice, the things that the frameworks tell you to do until they're blue in the face. But if there is no leadership buy-in, if leadership doesn't feel that it's important to change the culture, again, you're not going to see all the benefits of working this way. So I did work in a company where they decided that they were going to become an agile company, and the CIO was very clear, to the point that it was almost, if you're not on board, here's the door,
Yeah, go find
right?
another job, right?
Uh,
Yeah.
right,
That's what you
right.
need.
Which I think is awesome, right? It's
Yeah.
awesome that somebody can be so bold. You don't see a lot of that in many organizations, but you do
No,
see it
you
in
don't.
some. But for me, that shows the commitment
Commitment,
that
right?
the organization
Yep.
has, in order to make this change, right? It is a completely different way of working. It's a completely different way of leading. It's a completely different way of engaging your employees when you are an agile organization. So if you don't have that coming from the top, a lot of times there's going to be fear within the teams, even if you are an awesome scrum master, right? Like I was a very disruptive, bold scrum master, not disruptive in a bad way, but trying to
Yeah.
change
In a
the
good way.
culture,
Yeah.
right?
You're trying to innovate.
Uh,
You're trying to
and
innovate within the
right,
yeah, sure.
yeah. But if you're that type of person that you're trying to do your job and help the team become more efficient, and the team is afraid that if they go with what you're saying, they're going to get reprimanded or worse, right, by the
Hmm.
organization, they are not going to change the culture within the team because the organization is not headed in that direction.
Yeah.
So we do need leaders to buy into this, and there are like agile leadership classes that leaders can take, right? So they understand what it's like to lead an agile organization. And I think that if there's any organization that's serious about having their teams work in a more agile way, that their leaders need to go through a class like that and understand what does it mean, right? What does it mean to my organization? How is that going to change how we work? How is that going to change how we manage people, right? Because it is a very different way of doing that. So buy-in from leadership for me is key for a company to be successful, in adopting agile ways of working.
Yeah. And I think we actually just had an episode on data storytelling, but just kind of painting that picture, especially for leadership, of what's in it for me, to show
Yep.
them, this is what is going to happen by implementing this new way of thinking. So everyone's always wondering, basically picture yourself as the hero. This is how it's going to help you
Yep.
in your organization. It's just important to have their buy-in. Absolutely.
Yeah, and to speak to the language, they're looking at strategic partnerships and increased
Yeah.
revenue or quicker to that revenue that they had promised, right?
Mhm.
Their
Hmm.
shareholders or stakeholders. So, you really got to sell the benefits, right? And they're there. It's
Yep.
not like it's a smoke screen. They're really there. But
Right.
you have to
Yep.
you got to grease that wheel and you got to get that engine moving, right?
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I was coaching a company that does work with the government. They contract with the government, like the U.S. Army, and like building planes and stuff like that. And they wanted to know, why do I need to do this? And the first thing I did is get some case studies and say, here's how they're using in the military, right? Sometimes they just gotta see that it's been successful elsewhere in order for them to adopt it. So, if you are going to an organization and trying to sell this whole agile thing, and I don't mean sell because we don't make money by selling it, but
Yeah.
I think it's important that you, as you said, Liz, that they understand what's in it for them, but also how has this worked in other organizations such as mine, right?
Yeah.
Because not everybody is a software development company, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen it work in many different types of organizations, but it's important for them to know that it is possible to work in this manner and be more successful and save time and save money by delivering earlier, and seeing the benefits sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's hard to understand what the benefits are until you give them an example or two, right? I mean,
Yep.
real world example, right, where the rubber meets the road for them.
Well, people always want to know, well, how are other people using this, and their success. You can paint that picture, and they see that it can be replicated. Then you just get a little further with them and a little bit more buy-in. Now, Lucy, just switching gears, if people were interested in becoming a Scrum Master, getting more information, what's the best way to go about that?
So I am on LinkedIn, if people want to reach out to me directly. But of course, Scrum Alliance is the certifying body that I work with, that I do classes for. So if you go to scrumalliance.org, that is, one place where you can find out more. And of course, if you want to, do the Certified Scrum Master, Certified Scrum Product Owner classes, I am one of the instructors that does that. You can find my name, in the Find a Course area. But once again, you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, like I said before, and I think we're going to give them that information, when we post this. So,
and how long is the course?
It is a 2-day course, so it's 16 hours, or about 14 hours, because of course we take lunch during that time. But it's an immersive 2 days. With a lot of activities, and Marco can probably talk a little bit to this because he was in one of my classes. But it's a very engaging way of actually, learning as you go, instead of just, being a death by PowerPoint and just a lot of theory being thrown at you.
Yeah, I'm a believer, because if you're a company out there that's having a hard time getting products out the door, or delivering products to the customer in a timely manner and high quality, then you need to beef up your front end, right? This is where you kind of clean up all that waste and find out what it is that's causing you to not deliver what the customer wants, right? So, Lucy, it's been fantastic having you here. This is great.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun.
And
Yeah,
hopefully
thank you
we'll
so
have
much
you
for coming on.
back on further down the road, right?
Yep, sure,
Yep.
anytime.
Thank you so much. And you can find Marco and I at workstreamconsulting.com or info@workstreamconsulting.com. And new episodes are released every other Wednesday, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.